If you're trying training with your dog and you're feeling like they're not that food motivated, this is going to be the video for you. I'm going to be going over some different tips to increase food motivation in your dogs. And we're also going to be talking about some alternative ways that you can reinforce your dogs throughout the training process. So inherently, dogs are food motivated. They have to eat to survive. We just have to kind of be picky and choosy about when we choose to reward them, what we're rewarding with. We can figure out some different strategies involved with that to actually boost and build their food motivation over a period of time. So one of the first things that I would recommend thinking about is when you're actually trying to offer the food. If your dog just ate their breakfast or just ate their dinner, they're not going to be super motivated to actually take food and work for food during a training session because they're just not hungry. That's the same as us and people. I'm not going to be super motivated by food right after I've had a big meal. So timing whenever we're doing training with our dogs so that they're actually hungry, doing training sessions right before a meal time can be really helpful. Or if you're planning on doing training after a meal, maybe saving part of that meal to use as training later on and only feeding your dog half of their meal at mealtime. Now, for this video, most of those dogs are probably not going to actually work for their kibble. I totally understand that, but if you have the dog that will work for part of their food, that is a great easy option to just split that right in half, use half for training and half for giving them as their meal. The other thing surrounding food time is if you are what's called free feeding your dog, that means that they are allowed to have access to their food bowl and it is full for the entire day and you leave it set out. That can essentially kind of lower food motivation to a large degree because they have access to it all the time. And when our dogs have access to food all the time, that is something that just it becomes a part of their regular day-to-day and they're not going to be as excited by it or as motivated by it because they know they get access to it all the time. I prefer a set feeding schedule. I like this for a lot of medical reasons as well. If my dog does not eat one day, I know that something is wrong. And if I have them on a set feeding schedule, if they're not eating and I'm not seeing them eat within that 15 to 20 minute time gap that food bowl is down, then I can potentially pick up on something medically going on with them a whole lot sooner and rush them to the vet to see what's going on. But if we have a dog that is free fed and we don't actually know when they're eating or what they're consuming, it could be a couple of days before you actually realize that your dog is not touching their food. So you could potentially catch a medical problem really early on. So one of the things for building food motivation, and one of the very first things that I would try after you adjust maybe your dog's feeding schedule, you're thinking about the timing of when you're offering food, making sure that your dog is actually hungry whenever you're offering food. Past that, I would start to look at what you're actually offering. So a lot of times we can have all these great high hopes for a store-bought treat that we bought. I could spend $40 on a bag of treats, but ultimately if my dog does not like those treats, it is not high value to them. They really just don't like that food, but you spent so much money on it. It holds value to you because you spent a ton of money on it, but it holds no value or very little value to your dog. So you can't effectively use it as a high value food reinforcer. So what you're actually offering and what your dog likes can differ sometimes. A lot of times we want to force something to be high value, but our dogs do not see it as such. So trying a bunch of different things is exactly the first place that I would start. A lot of people that I work with this will come to me and say, hey Sarah, I've tried some maybe Zook's treats. I've tried a couple other store-bought treats. I've tried maybe a little bit of cheese. And my dog doesn't really like any of that stuff. That's only 4 things. There are so many other dead animal chunks that you could potentially try. There's so many other store-bought treats. There's beef liver, there's tripe. There's a whole variety of different things out there. So I'd really recommend browse around your local pet shop. I really like to go local for this too. They tend to have a lot of specialty goods that you might not find in a big box store. So look around, hunt around and see, is there something that looks interesting that my dog has not tried before? It depends on the dog and it's all in the eye of the beholder. So I would try a variety of different things and see what your dog likes. From there, once you're trying different stuff, I would make a list of your dog's like 3 to 5 top value treats, their highest reinforcer treats, the ones they like the most. And then what you can start to do is mess around with your feeding strategies. So building food motivation in dogs sometimes goes beyond finding a treat that they actually like and into actually teaching them that eating is a fun behavior. Sometimes we actually have to teach our dogs that eating is a skill and eating is a behavior that we actually want them to do. So what you can do with that is, again, depending on the dog, you can try out some different feeding strategies. You can start to toss the food around. A lot of times for a lot of dogs, toss food is way more exciting than hand-fed food. So you can give that a go. If you happen to have another dog and it is safe to do training sessions with the two of them together and your other dog happens to be very food motivated, a lot of times we can get our non-food food motivated dogs to participate in that just from seeing, hey, that other dog is getting treats, I would like some too. So we can kind of work with our non-food motivated dogs around friendly food motivated dogs that they're very comfortable with. And again, only if that's going to be a safe situation for them to actually boost their want to take food. So we can use a helper dog in that aspect. My dog Fenway is also really not that food motivated. He's actually one of the least food motivated dogs that I've ever worked with. So this has been an ongoing process for us since he was a little puppy. If you're dealing with that and you want to kind of see more of the behind the scenes of how I work with that week to week with him, we do have a Patreon and our link will be down in the description. You can kind of follow along. I take videos of training sessions with my dogs, and a lot of times that does involve building food motivation with Fen. So if you're interested in seeing more about that, you can get access to one of those videos a week for just $3 a month. That's 4 videos per month, or you can pay $2 more, $5 a month, and you get access to 3 videos a week, which is a lot. It's a lot of videos per month I wanted to make it affordable. So if you're interested in following along with our journey with food motivation with Fen, come follow us on Patreon. We'd love to have you. I'm also posting a ton about his fear and reactivity and that journey there. You also get a huge dose of Wrigley. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the day-to-day training with my own dogs, what that looks like, all the issues and troubleshooting that I do with them behind the scenes, come join us on Patreon. Link is down below. Aside from tossing the food, you can kind of like hold on to the food and run around with it and pretend like that food is like the most valuable thing. I've got my coffee here. If you've got like an object and you're like, oh my goodness, this is so exciting, wow, and I'm gonna run around with it. Both of my dogs are looking at me right now with this coffee. But I can make that object very interesting to my dogs by it looks ridiculous. You're gonna look really silly doing it, but I can start to be like, wow, what do I have? My dogs are gonna gain interest in that. And then I can start to maybe toss the food on the ground at that point and be like, wow, this is so exciting. Do you wanna check this out? So we're almost kind of like tricking our dogs in a way to being like, hey, this is kind of a cool thing. And a lot of times if we like boost their play energy in that, and especially if you have a more playful, goofy, silly dog or a younger dog, this can kind of bring out their silly side, and then we can pair that with them actually eating the food as well. And then as soon as they eat that little snack, we do the same thing. We might run across the room and be like, yeah, and like, let's go get some snacks over here. You almost make it kind of like a chase, hide and seek type of game with your dogs. That can be really exciting. I do have a video on an engagement activity game that can also build food motivation as well. I'm going to link to it right here and in the description of this video, but it basically involves placing a treat on the ground, allowing your dog to eat it, and then you run away and call your dog to you, or they have to come find you, and then they get the next treat placed on the ground. That is a great engagement game, and it's also going to be super helpful for building that food motivation. When you're doing these little games, you're going to use that list of your dog's 3 to 5 top favorite treats that you have found work really well. Within that mix of treats, again, depending on the dog, my puppy, he's not a puppy anymore, but I can still call him my puppy. My puppy tends to get bored of food really easily. So I will either mix all of those top level treats together in with some that he still likes but aren't his favorite top tier level treats. I call those medium value treats. So I'll make a trail mix, and the bulk of that trail mix is a combination of some medium value treats, is about half of it, and then his really high value treats are the other half of it. So for the trail mix, what you can do is mix in, depending on the situation that you're in, we're going to talk about situations here in a moment, but if you're just at home working with your dogs, you might throw in a mix of some of their lower value snacks. It might be their daily portion of food. You might mix in some of their medium value snacks, not chews, snacks, as well as some of those high value ones. So every little piece that they're getting is something different, but the different aspect is what makes it very exciting. So some dogs really like that aspect of, hey, every single time I get a treat from you, I get something a little bit different, which can be really exciting to them and actually help boost that motivation to want to keep working to earn that food. Now, that also might be a good way for your dog to get bored of all of it all at once. So I would play around with this. If you kind of have that dog that is like, and I got 10 different treats right now, and I'm fine with all of them, and they're kind of boring now, I'm done. That's a really good way to just get your dog to stop participating in what you're wanting them to participate in. So what I would do in that moment is separate them out into like individual Tupperwares or baggies, and you start with that lower value treat item, and you're working your way up throughout that training session as you notice your dogs start to get a little bit less excited about taking the previous treat that you had. As you get, if you've got 5 different treats, you might go all the way up to that 4th one, and then you might go back down to that 1st one again. So we're not constantly increasing the value of that food potentially, but we're actually swapping around. The last tip that I've tried and has been pretty successful in the past is actually putting some treats in a Tupperware container, closing that and kind of mixing it around a little bit, and kind of like I was doing with like the treats. I don't actually have treats in my hand, but we're like, ooh, like this is so exciting. In your hands, you can do the same thing in the Tupperware, and you shake the Tupperware container around and you kind of open it all dramatically, and you start to take a piece out and you're like, wow, this is really exciting. That can also be a great way to motivate your dog to be like, hey, what is that you have, and want to actually go investigate it. So that is absolutely a way that I have used with Fen in the past that has worked for getting him to actually start taking food. And then you might open it and toss a treat out of it, or just offer it hand fed to your dog. Again, depending on the dog that you have, tossed food might be more exciting than hand fed food, but I would try both. If you're in the middle of trying this and you're finding that your dog is just getting a little bit bored, you're sending them kind of farther away, essentially, they're not super motivated by any of the things that you have, I would recommend stopping that training session or stopping that food motivation building session and abandoning it and approaching it with some different stuff later, a different approach later, a different time of day. I would not try to push your way through that. I think that ends up being a little bit more punishing to our dogs if they really don't like the stuff that we're offering them. It's not seen as reinforcing. So trying to push our way through it is actually probably going to do a little more damage than it is good. So I'd try, first couple of minutes, see if switching up your feeding strategies, if switching up the treat that you have is working, to figure out what works for your dog. And then if you're finding that really nothing is sticking or working all that well, I'd abandon that session and come back to it later. The other thing that you can try is if your dog is motivated, and you know this for certain, is more motivated by something else. My puppy Fenway, much more toy motivated than he is food motivated. If I take a ball out, he will choose a ball over any piece of meat that I put in front of him, any piece of food or chew or anything that I put in front of him. He will choose the ball every single time. So the other thing that we could start to think about is utilizing that as a motivating factor here. If you take the food, I will give you the ball. It's a weird concept, I know, but it's a similar concept to if you sit, I will give you the treat, when we're looking at eating as a skill. So we can actually start to shape the process of your dog taking food by offering something else as a higher value reinforcer immediately after that. So that is a fun way to try this stuff out as well. If you have a dog that you know for certain is motivated by something else, it could be access to outside, it could be access to just adventuring on a walk with you, the moment your dog takes food, they immediately gain access to moving forwards. So we can actually also help build eating as a skill in that subset by using that higher motivation item as a reward for eating. Now, if my dog is motivated by toys, why would I push so hard for him to also be motivated by food? There's a couple different reasons that I do want Fen to be motivated by food, and I do want dogs that I work with to be motivated by food to some degree. A lot of times I might be in a situation, especially working through Fenway's reactivity. He is a little bit reactive to dogs and people. It's very fear-based. So a lot of times in those situations, as I'm trying to kind of work him closer, I want him to be fully aware of what's going on around him. And if I bring a ball out in that moment, the ball is the only thing that he's going to focus on, and he's not actually going to pay attention to what's going on around him, which is okay in some moments, but in other moments when I actually want him to absorb what's happening to him, there's nothing physically happening to him, but what's going on in his surroundings, if he's solely fixating on the ball, then I am not actually going to make any behavior progress there. He is going to be more likely to get startled by something if something gets pretty close to us and he didn't see it because he was focused on the ball, and then he turns around and he sees that dog or that thing, whatever it is. He's much more likely to overreact to this thing that just popped up in his environment. That is not something that I want. Using food during training sessions in general actually is a helpful thing for our high drive dogs to slow them down and think to a large degree. Gets their thinking brain going. So while Fen is at the point where he can think in the presence of toys, he's still not capable of doing a lot of different things in the presence of toys, and learning new skills is one of those things. So a lot of times I will teach him a new skill that might be a little bit more intricate. It might involve different movements of his body. It might involve his brain a little bit more. I will use food to help him actually synthesize that information, and then once he's got it, then I'll transfer it onto toys later on. So teaching new skills with food can allow you to do a whole lot of different stuff, but it involves your dog being motivated by that food in general. So even though I have something that is a higher value reinforcer and it comes in very, very handy, it's not always easy to use that in every single circumstance. There are circumstances a lot of times where food is much more convenient, and he's actually going to learn more from using food in that situation. If you're sitting there thinking, okay, this is all well and great, Sarah, but my dog won't take food anywhere outside my house. What that basically means is outside your house is too exciting or too stressful, more than likely. Those are two really common reasons that dogs will not take food, is when they are too stressed out or worried or anxious about something, or if they're way too excited by their environment. So I actually went through this exact same thing with Fenway whenever he was at the very beginning of all of his reactivity and fear-based issues. We went through the exact same thing. So what I did at that point is, number one, I would in that moment try to minimize your dog's world. If they're not taking food outside, it's because of something. Probably because they're either too stressed, they're worried about something that is in the environment, or they're too excited. If you have the dog that is too excited, I would bring that dog to maybe the front of your entranceway and open up your front door, or maybe open up a window and start to do training sessions in front of that with their leash on so they don't bolt out the front door on you. But we're kind of getting like a peek of letting the world in without bringing our dog out into it. So we teach our dogs to take food in that circumstance before we move them forwards into a harder situation where we got people and other dogs and squirrels and bunnies and wind and birds and all the things going on. We minimize that. We want to minimize that and teach our dogs, this is how you take food here, and then in the presence of the next thing, in the presence of the next thing. So again, it's a skill. So a lot of times managing your environment and making the world smaller to a large degree whenever you're trying to build that food motivation for them wanting to take food anywhere outside and even paying attention to you in general, minimizing that and managing the environment that you're taking them into can be extremely helpful. And if your dog is struggling everywhere outside, start with your front door open or even cracked or a window open and partially let the world in, but your dog is still physically inside. Once you have that, you might move into the front yard. And at this point, with a dog that is not extremely food motivated, I would wait until that dog turns and looks at me or is actively asking for food. This is a great moment to bring your other helper dog into play too that wants to take food. It can help teach the other dog that is not so motivated by food to actually want to take food as well. So that's something that you can also start to think about, is going into a situation and actually waiting for your dog to ask, hey, can I have a snack right now? And if you've worked on eating as a skill in your house, I would recommend, I'm in my backyard right now, you can work on it in your backyard, out in your front yard. Before you even attempt to take it out anywhere else, you work on it there. So then it's already kind of built in as a habit for your dog and a skill that they're more likely to turn and ask for when you're out and about with them, when there's not a whole lot going on. On the flip side, if you are working with your dog and they are taking food outside and all of a sudden they stop taking food, again, I would be scanning the environment, thinking like, what is it that's going on around here? For Fen, it's typically something that he's worried about that just showed up. And when a dog stops taking food, he's likely too close to the situation. So I'm going to immediately add distance. I'm going to locate whatever it is and whatever the thing is that he is worried and concerned about, and I'm going to try to increase my distance away from that. As soon as I get far enough away from that trigger, is what we kind of call that, or the trigger leaves, then he starts to take food again, then I know that he's kind of reached back to a normal state again. So we can feel free to move forwards on our walk. That's also a really good gauge of just how your dog is doing in the environment in general. Are they taking food? Are they not taking food? If they're not taking food, why? Are they too excited? Do they see their favorite person up ahead? Or is maybe another dog that is barking and lunging at them over there and they're concerned about that? Always constantly analyzing this kind of stuff can be super helpful when you're out and about with your dog on a walk. So you can start to gauge when is an appropriate time to offer food. In those moments, we would love to build positive associations with them, so we'd love to offer food, but our dogs might not be ready for us to have them stay in that situation and actually work through it by taking a lot of food. So we might need to leave for the time being and work our way up to that slowly over a period of time. I also kind of hinted at this. If you start by doing this inside, treat toss games, different value food, all of your training sessions, timing of things, if you're also doing this on a daily basis or multiple times a day for an extended period of time, taking food from you also becomes a bit more habitual to your dog. It becomes part of their routine. So if you start in your house and then you go to maybe a really quiet neighborhood park and there's nothing going on around, and you start to toss food out the exact same way that you would do inside your house or in your backyard, you start to toss food out. You let your dog check out that environment and then there's nothing going on. Food might be exciting to them at that point because there's nothing else to really look at. They start taking food there. Then you maybe go to another spot. At a certain point, your dog is actually gonna, what's called generalize taking food. They're gonna start to realize like, oh, I can actually take food in every single environment that we go into, and it becomes a very normalized thing. So we can also make taking food habitual, which is kind of a cool concept. Another good example that I have with this is a lot of times, again, just access to the environment can be seen as a reward. Your dog working to go out the front door, on their walks, access to their food bowl, access to their favorite person, access to anything that they like and they want to do, they feel motivated by doing. I have a video with Fenway. It's a boundary training video that has a perfect progression of example with food motivation in it. He starts and we start, this is the first time I was teaching him to wait inside. While I open up that door, my front door, I'm teaching him to wait inside. So I had really good steak on me, I had cheese, I had hot dogs, I had ground beef, I had really high value stuff on me. As soon as I cracked open that door, Fen went from I take food to I don't want to take food. I actually would like to gain access to outside. So what I actually did to motivate him in that moment, my goal for that was to teach him, hey, you have to pay attention to me first before you gain access to going outside. I call this a real life reward. This is something that he wants access to, is access to outside. But I can control that by having the door closed or open and allowing him to go through or not. So we can actually teach our dogs as well, hey, if you want access to this, you need to do this for me first. So in that video, I show the process of teaching Fen. I want him to offer me eye contact, and then he's gonna earn access to going outside. But the moment I crack open that door, he stops taking food. So ideally, I would like to click and feed him for times that he is waiting inside and offering me eye contact to communicate with him. Nice job, Betty, that's what I want. I'm gonna give you a click and a treat for that. He didn't want the food. He did not want the food. So I tossed that out. Not literally, but I stopped using food in that moment. The moment he offered me eye contact, I would immediately release him and allow him to go through the door. So him offering the eye contact was immediately rewarded by gaining access to outside. So that's a great example of how you can utilize real life rewards if your dog will not work for food in a particular environment. I also find it just a really helpful skill. That's what my older dog Wrigley works for the majority of our walks now. A lot of times she's not working for food anymore. She's kind of past that. I'll take food out, and she's able to take food if a situation gets challenging or she's getting barked at. I want to reinforce her for that. But otherwise, she's working to earn access to a lot of different things out on her walk. So in the boundary training video, that's where we started, is Fen was working for access to outside. As soon as he kind of got that, he got to explore the front yard, he got to do the in and the out. He was like, cool, all right, there's nothing super exciting going on outside. I would like to take food again. So I got to a place within that same video where he actually wanted to take food again because he realized that the environment was not all that exciting. So food then shot up in that motivation, high value factor, and I could utilize it again. But I waited until he let me know that he wanted to take food. Instead of constantly shoving it in his face, I gently was offering it over a period of time until he was like, oh yeah, okay, I actually would like this. I do the exact same thing on walks with him, and I'd recommend doing the same thing with your dogs at home that you're working on with this, is I will typically wait until unless there's something going on, I will typically wait until he asks me for food in that moment. And as soon as he does that, then I will offer him all sorts of stuff that he potentially wants. So I'm waiting until he actually is in the mindset of wanting food. That later on will translate and help to him being able to take food at all given points during our walk. But a lot of times that's what I'll do on our walks as well, is I'll wait. I'll let him check out the environment, explore around, sniff, pee, do all the things, until he turns to me and he's like, hey, I kind of would like the food. And up until that point, we're working on real life rewards. I might have a toy. Toys are another great motivation factor. If your dog is toy motivated, we can absolutely use the same concept. If you do the thing for me first, you gain access to the toy after as a reward. So in the meantime, he is working for access to other stuff, and I can utilize that. So if your dog is not super food motivated, I would also try to figure out what is something else that they are motivated by. And a lot of times that can be either food or real life rewards. Access to sniffing, moving forwards, going for a walk, going out your front door, different stuff like that. If you can figure out what something is that your dog likes and harness it for the time being, so prevent their immediate access for it, either by shutting the front door, having them on leash, you ask for something that you would like. And I'd make that something super easy initially. I have another video that goes over this, like eye contact. The moment your dog offers it, you gain them, or they gain access to that something, whatever it is. So if you have a dog that is not extremely food motivated, don't worry, you're not alone. I have one myself. There are a lot of things that we can do. All of the things that I mentioned in this video are all different things that you can try. And the biggest thing is time with all of this stuff. Don't expect it to be an overnight shift, that you're gonna try a brand new treat and it's gonna be the magic that's gonna happen, the magic wand. For some dogs it is, but for a lot of dogs, this is something that we need to build over a period of time, and time is your best friend with this one. So not all bets are off. Don't lose hope. Try all of these different things. switch your routines around, switch the food around, switch the feeding style around, switch the environment around, we can manipulate a lot of factors to actually boost and build food motivation in our dogs. And this is something that I think is not well known. So I wanted to make a video that provides a bunch of tips on all different things that you can try, and I'm gonna I pulled a bunch of different examples into this as well, things that you can think about, things that you can look at. I definitely am dealing with one myself that is not very food motivated. It's an ongoing process and it changes day to day, so hang in there. But I hope some of these tips are really helpful for you. Please let me know if you have any questions. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys in our next one.